Today's video, the second published about the economics of the mission to Mars, will use a shotgun approach to discuss several basic economic ideas that will be explained in much more detail in later videos. Today's video will briefly address the following: what the mission to Mars might cost, that the mission to Mars will reduce costs dramatically, the use of resources on Mars, what to buy and what not to buy on Earth and on Mars, and exporting from Mars. The cost to go to Mars has been estimated in the past to be between $50 billion and $500 billion. I will note here several things. First, these estimates are rather old. Second, the inflation we are experiencing in the early 2020s will no doubt dramatically increase costs, even at a self-sufficient community. Third, these costs generally relate to science-based rather than colonization-based programs. Fourth, it matters a great deal if you are talking about sending 1 or 2 missions to Mars, or talking about building an infrastructure that will allow for numerous manned missions to Mars. In any event, there will likely be 2 videos presented later about how the mission to Mars ideas can dramatically reduce the cost of colonization from costs developed by NASA. In addition, there will likely be 2 videos to discuss how and why the mission to Mars will be able to afford these costs, regardless of what they might be. My second point today will be to remind the viewer of the central idea that one main purpose of the Earth Embassy is to create a self-sufficient community on Earth that can plan and implement its transfer to Mars. If this planning is done correctly, this self-sufficient community can utilize the resources on Mars to continue being self-sufficient. Again, in later videos, I will discuss the unique aspects of Mars, certainly vis-a-vis the Moon, of why abundant resources similar to those found on Earth will be available to colonists on Mars. Careful planning will allow the colonists to plan the successful transfer of their economy from the Earth Embassy to Mars. Obtaining important things like water, oxygen, and metals should be easy to understand. Less easy, though not technologically difficult, will be the need to create rocket fuels on Mars and to create a community that depends initially much more on polymers, plastics, than metals for its day-to-day products. All of these things can be done on Mars, given proper planning and appropriate incentives. Next, I introduce the idea of what the mission to Mars should buy and what it should not buy. Both on Mars and at the Earth Embassy, certain items should be bought off the shelf when it makes economic sense to do so. I will give 2 examples. There is no reason why wheat or corn needs to be grown at the Earth Embassy. Both of these staples can be purchased using hard currency. A program to obtain such currency will be discussed also. Things like computer chips, wires, etc. can also be bought and then turned into a small electrical grid and computers by skilled persons at the Earth Embassy. On Mars, weight will play an enormous role in determining what needs to be imported and what needs to be created on Mars itself. Drugs come immediately to mind. It makes little sense to me that sophisticated drugs should not be purchased and shipped to Mars. The infrastructure to create such drugs would likely be very difficult to recreate early in the colonization, and, more importantly, the weight of such drugs is so low that putting them aboard spacecraft is not likely to add much cost to a given mission's overall expense. There is a fallacious idea that Mars needs to export physical things to Earth to pay for the things it imports. While I am not saying that exporting things like heavy water to Earth would be a bad idea were it economically feasible, what I am saying, however, and what I will discuss in detail, is why such ideas are, frankly, just downright wrong. Perhaps the best way to begin that discussion is to consider that when the U.S. wants a product manufactured in China, it does not need to export its own products of equivalent value to China. Things like cash, intellectual property, debt, trade or other concessions, etc., are also used when things are exchanged between nations. Exchanges like this can be used on Mars as well, as I will explain in a later video. I will end today's economics video by saying that the discussion of financial wherewithal will constitute the largest category of videos I create. After all, it is not because of spacesuit design that we are not on Mars. We have not set foot on the red planet mainly because of the lack of financial wherewithal needed to support such an effort. At the Earth Embassy, the twin problems of lack of political will and lack of financial wherewithal can be addressed and overcome as the volunteer colonists prepare to transport themselves, their community, and their economy to Mars. Going home, going